shady colonizers, pissed off island people, World War II bunkers, and a lot of blood, guts, and gore. That's what happens in Gehenna, where death lives. And we'll be getting into it next on the Bloody Breakdown. Let's get creepy. So the first half of this video is going to be completely spoiler free as I give a review of the pros and cons, while the end of it, halfway through, I'll start going into some of the plot twists to basically dig deeper into some of the themes that I would have to talk about in terms of talking about the spoilers. So Gehenna, where death lives, deals with 5 people who are part of some type of investment development real estate company happening on the island somewhere, who end up going into a World War II bunker and somehow getting trapped inside, and a whole bunch of other stuff pops off that lets you know that there's some really crazy things happening there, because essentially the place where the 5 people want to build the new hotel or whatever is sacred ground of the indigenous people of this island, and it's been cursed. And so they get trapped into a World War II bunker, and basically the curse comes to life and they can't get out for whatever reason. So the whole movie is essentially these 5 people trying to figure out how to get out of the World War II bunker that they're trapped in, that they seem to kind of travel back in time to. And there's a lot of weird ghost and, creepy moments that happen to essentially unfold this story of what has happened on this island when it came to the Spanish colonization that happened there. So this movie is very interesting. To me, I was pleasantly surprised because this movie, I think, when I got it, I heard that it was going to be, straight to VOD, and which is nothing wrong with that. There's some gems when it comes straight to VOD, but sometimes it can be a little, low budget and whatnot like that. But this particular movie was not. The director is actually Hiroshi Katagiri, who is responsible for the effects of certain movies that we all know and love, like Jurassic Park 3 and Pacific Rim. And this is his directorial debut, and he doesn't disappoint in this, actually. Overall, this was a very creepy kind of ghost story set with some socio-political themes that I think if you're kind of into a little bit of a deeper horror that has a little bit of a deeper point to it when it comes to messaging, you'll definitely kind of be interested in this for sure. I know I was, and I was pleasantly surprised because I didn't think I would be. So let's get into the pros of this movie that I really like. Atmosphere. I actually thought that they set it up very nicely in kind of telling you the story of what was going on the island with the natives there, the indigenous people there, and in terms of the fact that the place was cursed. But of course, people who aren't part of that culture were disrespecting that and basically wanting to build on the land. And so it created this story, a story that we've heard time before. This isn't something new, and kind of played on that. So that was really cool. And also the acting in the movie was actually on point. Like, sometimes you watch some of these not so mainstream movies and horror movies in general, and the acting, it leaves a little to be desired. And in this case, all of the 5 main characters did a really great job in terms of kind of being very subtle about it, being very much in their characters. You believed that their characters had a story before they entered there, and they played well against each other, which it really worked for the story, because it has to work for the story, because for a majority of the film, it's these 5 people that you are watching go through these things in this World War II bunker. I'll admit, some of them very much were the regular tropes, like the strong woman who has a edge to her because she has a dark secret of her past, and the jerk guy who's basically just a straight up capitalist. He just wants to get his money. He's kind of a sexist, misogynist kind of guy. There were a few tropes of that, but even with the tropes, when it came to the characters, it wasn't so like, oh my gosh. I mean, maybe that was a little bit of the acting that helped in that, and maybe it was just the fact that the dialogue wasn't completely so contrived, and just like where you hear certain, when you watch a movie, you hear certain dialogue and you're like, who wrote that? Who wrote that and read it back and thought, that's okay? when it's totally not. That didn't happen in this movie. There was a lot of moments where the dialogue was realistic, the arguments that happened was realistic, the drama that was going on was realistic, and that made it so you didn't hate all the characters. And I know I say this a lot when I do these reviews, but I think it's important when you are in a horror movie, when you're watching a horror movie, to kind of have someone in the cast of characters that you can not necessarily identify with, but you kind of are invested in their plot, in them surviving, in them going on this journey in some capacity. And you can't really do that if you hate everybody. Another cool thing about this was the effects. Like I was saying, the director who did this movie in their directorial debut also has done some really great stuff in movies prior to this when it comes to effects, and they did not disappoint. And it wasn't really even that the effects were like so outrageous or anything like that. They actually were quite subtle. Like, you know, there were a few things with like dead bodies, ghosts, blood, people getting beaten and kind of showing their wounds in a way that it was done so artful. Is artful a word? I don't know. Like in such a, I don't want to say beautiful way, maybe graceful, that it wasn't like one of these movies where it's so much blood and gore and you just really can't, you know, get into it because it's like, you know, you're more so reacting to the blood and the guts and you're like, but it's more like it worked for the story, the graphic images that happen, even though the graphic images weren't so overt where, you know, you get really grossed out. I'm not a big fan of gross out horror, so that was a nice balance. Although there were moments where I was like, you know, because the effects were really done well, but in a very subtle way, which was very cool. The other thing that I think is a pro about this movie was the socio-political undercurrent of this movie. And it kind of goes into the con of the movie a little bit too, but the socio-political thing I'm talking about is this question of capitalism. And stick with me for a second. This question of capitalism and this idea of, you know, colonization of people who are already on a land, and another people, usually, you know, what we've seen through history, the Spanish, the, you know, European or whatever, coming in other countries and kind of taking over and kind of disrespecting those lands, and what happens, you know, in the aftermath of that. In this sense, what happens is supernatural, right? These people basically got these peoples of this burial ground, of this place they belong to, kind of got their revenge by placing a curse on this land where the World War II bunker ends up being on. So that in turn is you know, cursed as well, and that's, you know, basically the basis of this movie, that this place is cursed, aka this is where death lives, you know. And that's not a spoiler, that's the gist of that's the plot line that, you know, gets all this started. And so I think there's something to be said for that, in the sense of, I mean, it's a little bit more of an exaggerated way, but within the movie, there's moments like with certain characters who are really greedy or really just all about themselves. There are moments where the other characters are very like on point, giving commentary, like, oh, I guess that's how you work when it comes to this kind of system, you know, things like that. And I was just like, whoa, is this movie like woke? And it wasn't like overtly woke, like, you know, down with, you know, capitalism, down with the system. But it was more like, this is the repercussions of what happens when a people are ravished, when land is taken for granted, when capitalism is so greedy in that sense that, you know, you don't care about the people who are affected. I mean, of course, you know, maybe not what exactly happens is demons and the cursed land, but it's kind of, the horror was a reflection of that. And I just thought that was awesome. I was like, wow. Those are some of the pros. And I think those are pretty big pros to give this movie a shot, for sure. So this movie did have a few cons. One in particular, actually. I mean, and one that was sort of a con, and it just kind of goes with my pro, so it kind of neutralizes itself, is the idea of, well, one, the first con was how dark it was. It was very dark at times, and I get it because they were underground and they were in a bunker and it wasn't completely lit, but there were times when the light was on and it was still very dark. And I'm like, I don't know if that was like a choice, or if that was just like the budget, I don't know. But there were moments where I was like, this is too dark. Like, I don't know if that's like a style now with certain horror pictures, because I've seen it before. So I'm starting to think maybe it's a like stylistic choice. I don't like that stylistic choice. I want to see my screen. The second con, and like I said, I think it neutralizes, is when it comes to, you know, this whole question of like voodoo and cursed land and indigenous people or brown people or black people kind of getting their revenge off of like someone who's like an oppressor or something like that. I think it can be a slippery slope where you can fall into the magical brown people trope or the magical, in other cases, magical Negro trope. I'm not saying that this movie did it, but I was worried for like the first about 20 to 30 minutes of the film. I was a little worried that we were going to go there. I was like, oh no, like it's going to be the weird, the crazy magical brown people are evil and these white people have this, you know, because of miscommunication, they're being punished when they shouldn't be. You know, I really thought it was going to be something like that. And I was pleasantly surprised that it was a fine line between that trope. It's not a bad trope necessarily. I mean, magical beings are magical beings, but I do think sometimes certain genres and movies can fall into brown people being like the other, and therefore like their culture and stuff is something magical and weird and dark and like scary. And when that's the case, I don't really enjoy it. I just think it's a cop out. So the movie didn't do that though, so that's great. And I was just saying that for a second it looked like they might have been doing that. So should you give Gehenna, Where Death Lives, a stab? You should totally give this movie a stab. I thought, you know, there were some really cool special effects. There was some really great characterization. The socio-political themes in this movie were spot on. They didn't bludgeon you over the head, but I think you walk away with a very cool sense of, you know, messaging. And at the same time, this was a really good ghost monster story. Like, I honestly was like, wow, this was a good, succinct story of what happens when these people go into what is a haunted underground bunker. And I felt like the plot twist and all of that just worked really well with each other, where I was very satisfied. And I would actually recommend this to a lot of people. It comes out very soon, and I think people should definitely give it a watch because I enjoyed it for sure. So you should definitely give this movie a stab. It is stab approved. So, did you watch Gehenna? Are you curious about Gehenna? Do you have some other cool, you know, stories that kind of don't play on the magical brown people trope that you want to recommend to me? Make sure to comment down below and let me know your thoughts and your suggestions. And also be sure to subscribe so that you are the first to know when I post my new videos and movie reviews. Okay, so spoilers when it comes to this movie that I want to talk about. So the twist. I thought the twist was really cool at the end. This idea. Okay, so I will admit, like, as soon as like the lights went out and everything, like they all passed out and they woke back up, I figured out the twist. Like, but that's me. I'm one of those people, I actually like look at a movie and look out for the twist. But I'm also one of those people where it doesn't ruin a movie for me to know what's going to happen, because I think if a movie is good enough, then I can still know what's going to happen and still enjoy the whole movie and not just that twist at the end. I mean, if your whole movie depends on a twist at the end, then it's probably not a very good movie. And I think this movie, once I figured out the twist, which was the idea that somehow they had went back in time and that the people that they came in as was them encountering their dead selves. I know that sounds confusing, but if you watch this, then you know what I'm talking about. I kind of figured that out already, particularly because the whole thing with her, the main girl, having worn pants, and she also had pants on. So, I mean, it was the silliest thing to notice, but I also was able to figure out the plot of the twist by that. And I thought that was just really cool. It was this really cool idea of, you know, someone has to bear witness, and if you don't die, if you're the last to die, then you have to stay alive to basically bear witness and remember the travesty of what happened to those people who were colonized. And I thought that was deep. I was like, because that's what happened to the original Spanish colonizer that they had killed, or that the indigenous people had cursed. They made it so he would live forever in pain and agony and basically bear witness to the trauma he caused. Because there's this idea, and I'm going to get deep with this, I think there's this idea when it comes to history that people tend to want to forget about it, right? Especially if they are part of a group of people who might have in the past been oppressive to other people. There's this question of, well, that was then, get over it, blah, blah. And this movie had a very cool theme of saying, no, you don't get to get over it. Someone has to bear witness. Someone has to be made to suffer to remember. Someone has to be around to remember. And that was a very poignant thing to me. I just thought that's really cool. And the way they did it, I mean, because like I said, I figured out the twist that they had encountered themselves like 75 years in the past or whenever World War II happened, but I didn't realize why that was until it was explained. And I just thought that's not only a cool twist, but it's also a very smart twist. And when you got those, I mean, that's perfect for like a good ghost horror story. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that because that was also tied into the socio-political aspect of it. The fact that someone has to bear witness to history and trauma when so often in our day and age, so many people want to forget or be ahistorical, thus apolitical when it comes to these things. So once again, another reason to watch this very cool film. And it wasn't super long either. Like it's about an hour and a half, hour, 40 minutes. And before you know it, it's over, but it does it so well that it packs a punch in like the whole film. So it was really a great movie. I really enjoyed it. So yeah, if you watched it and you have some comments about that awesome twist that happened, please comment down below and let me know your thoughts. And also be sure to subscribe so you are one of the first to know when I post my new horror movie reviews. Thanks for watching. Let's get creepy together.